There was a vegan event that I recently attended. A tall German middle-aged woman at the event that now lives in the States started talking about the Jews. I was standing nearby to the people she was conversing with. She said that she would be arrested in Germany for what she believes. I joined the conversation and asked her what it is that she believes that she thinks would get her arrested in Germany. She said the Holocaust is fake. Why are there survivors? She argued. In a real Holocaust, she continued, there are no survivors. In the Holodomor, she argued, there were no survivors, which is completely untrue. She then went to blame Bolshevism and communism on the Jews, even though Jews were murdered and persecuted under the Bolsheviks and communists. Stalin, Beria, Mao, Pol Pot, some of the worst mass murderers that were instrumental in implementing communism were from Christian, and in the case of Mao and Pol Pot, Buddhist backgrounds. Many of the Christian-born, Buddhist-born, Jewish-born, or people from other religions that embraced communism not only rejected religion, but also persecuted those that practiced religion. The German woman laid at the feet of the Jews all of the crimes committed by the communists, which is exactly what the mass-murdering Hitler and the Nazis did. Jew haters blame everything on Jews. In the warped minds of Hitler-loving revisionist, Hitler, the mass-murdering deranged man, is cast as the pitiful victim of the Jews. The Nazis and their collaborators tortured, raped, murdered babies, children, the young, the old, the sick, the feeble, the disabled, the handicapped, the healthy. Civilians that were completely defenseless and posed no threat to the conspiracy-minded cowards that were the mass murderers and torturers of defenseless civilians. Furthermore, I said to the German woman, the only reason there were Jewish survivors of the Holocaust after Hitler already wiped out over 90% of European Jewry was because Hitler lost the war. If the war had continued, no Jew would have survived. Since that time, there have been other genocides, and in each of these genocides, there are survivors. This includes, and is not limited to, the genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda, the Khmer Rouge genocide in Cambodia, the genocide against the Yazidis, the genocide in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and more. Nothing I said dissuaded this determined Jew hater. She then stated that Judaism promotes pedophilia and showed a passage she had on her phone which she said is from the Talmud. The passage read that if a 9-year-old child commits sexual acts, there is no liability. See, she falsely proclaimed, Judaism promotes pedophilia because people can commit pedophilia and they are not held liable, in her words. I said to her, what you are falsely using as proof that Judaism condones or promotes pedophilia is specific regarding liability only if a 9-year-old or younger child acts out sexually. It is not written that teenagers and adults are not responsible for their actions and that they are not to be held liable if they sexually abuse children. Furthermore, I added, pedophilia involves older adolescents or adults that desire children sexually. Children themselves are not pedophiles if they act out sexually. If children are acting out sexually, they are in need of a therapeutic or psychiatric intervention, not a criminal justice intervention, which is why the passage is clear that there is no liability only in regards to a 9-year-old child or younger, and that it does not pertain to teenagers and adults. There was nothing in what she presented as evidence that Judaism promotes pedophilia that in any way condoned, tolerated, or promoted pedophilia. Nonetheless, she would not back down. She was determined to prove that Jews and Judaism are demonic and that Jews control the world and everything bad that happens in the world. Regarding the Holocaust, I said to her, there were many witnesses, including the survivors. There are also the American soldiers and other Allied soldiers that liberated concentration camps and that were witnesses. There were children and teenagers, some still alive now as elderly people, that witnessed the mass shootings that took place in Ukraine and in other places in Eastern Europe, in which millions of Jews were slaughtered by being taken to ravines or forests and fields where pits were dug and the Jews were stripped naked and shot. Jewish women, teenagers, and girls were raped and sexually abused often before being murdered. There is enormous forensic evidence regarding the Holocaust, including the Holocaust by Bullet, which is also the name of a book written by a Catholic priest that documents the Holocaust by Bullet. A Jew hater wants to hate Jews. You cannot have a rational conversation with them. They need to hate Jews for whatever perverse reasons, cowardice, and human deficiencies make them this way. What was sad to me was the lack of outrage or concern by those listening to this nonsense. A supposedly neutral event that should have been about human health and animal welfare never should have taken this ugly turn. But it did because, like it or not, anti-Semitism, meaning specifically the hatred of Jews, is far more rampant than Jews themselves want to admit, let alone society at large. It did not take much for Germany to go from one of the most advanced countries in Europe and in the world into a raping, stealing, torturing, murdering madhouse mobilized around hatred for Jews and a determination to see them destroyed, no matter how many millions, Germans included, had to die. A young woman who said she was Christian was present during this heated argument. She asked me why Jews reject Jesus. It seemed to me that she was more concerned with why Jews, in her words, reject Jesus, instead of why millions of people of Christian background all across Europe had no problem raping, murdering, enslaving, torturing, and stealing everything the Jews owned, and why an anti-Semite in front of us was repeating the same nonsensical, conspiracy-minded garbage and hate that Hitler spewed and that millions blindly accepted and implemented, all of which led to a world war, the loss of over 50 million lives, genocide, the Holocaust, the loss of millions of lives, which included Germans, destroyed Europe, mass murder, and more. I am not a religious scholar. I do not think the absence of something in a religion means the rejection of something that is in another religion. Judaism is about one God. If Christians believe Jesus is part of that one God and that God had a son, then who am I to tell them they are wrong any more than who are they to tell me I am wrong in my belief that there is only one God, that God did not have a son, and that the Messiah was never meant to be God. I said that the commandment, thou shalt not murder, should be the most fundamental, basic principle that all of humanity lives by. People continuously make exceptions to this very basic commandment that should form the glue that holds all of humanity together. The religious Christian woman said that believing in God and worshiping God is the most important commandment, more important than the commandment not to murder. She could not understand why Jews, again in her words, reject Jesus. And she exclaimed that in the Ezekiel chapter in the Old Testament, the coming of Jesus was clearly prophesied. I explained that if she could read Hebrew fluently, she would know that what is in Ezekiel is different than many of the translations of Ezekiel. Poetic liberty was taken in order to make a case for Jesus that simply is not there in the original Hebrew Old Testament. I said, faith means nothing if people do not act as ethical, moral, responsible human beings, and that whether or not someone believes in God or something else is less important than how they act. Plenty of Germans and their East European and West European collaborators raped Jewish women and children, beat, tortured, and murdered defenseless Jewish civilians by the millions, babies included, little children, old people, civilians of all ages, and still they went by the millions to church. Their faith did not keep them from murdering, stealing, torturing, and raping. When people of religions different from Judaism proclaim that Jews that do not believe in what they believe are hard-headed or somehow morally, ethically, or spiritually deficient, it is the first step in dehumanizing and demonizing the Jew. The anti-Semitic German woman, whose own grandparents were probably Nazis, has embraced their demented hate, having learned nothing from history. Jew hatred is a coward's crutch that far too many weak people hold on to. Demented leaders use the hatred of Jews to gain power and money. The need to scapegoat, the need to demonize, the need to have a target to hate keeps humanity in darkness. The failure of those that do not hate but will not stand up against those that do ensures the darkness remains. There are very serious environmental issues that threatens the life of all of humanity. Nuclear weapons threatens the lives of all of humanity. A big chunk of the world population, rather than face the real problems that humankind faces, including the enormous poverty and environmental degradation and destruction in the world, would rather keep their lives filled with twisted conspiracies and ugly illusions, focusing on the Jew as their target, crutch, and scapegoat.